The Songwriter Chapter 10. No time to spare. With my sixth string in the closet, I sat inside my berth on board the Belfast to Heysham ferry. I had money in my pocket, a Mersey beat sound in my head, and the promise of a good night's sleep ahead. I remember the last crossing I had across the Irish Sea and wanted to get my head down as soon as possible. As the ferry had left Belfast behind, I realised my head on the pillow had just sent me off into a deep sleep. And opened my eyes, the ferry was preparing to dock at Heysham. I quickly got myself shaved and dressed. Although breakfast was rushed, I felt revived and ready for the day ahead. I felt relieved to leave the gunfire and fear behind in Belfast, and felt excited about doing some busking on the streets of Liverpool. My first assault on Merseyside, home of the Fab Four, Cilla Black, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Freddie and the Dreamers, Everton and Liverpool Football Club, and the magic of so many unknown people and places I had yet to see. I stood there on the car deck watching cars and trucks roll off the Sea Link ferry and drive away onto the dock at Heysham. I made my way to the foot passenger disembarkation exit and walked the plank with my guitar and bag where the bus waited to bring people to Lime Street Station in the heart of Liverpool. It wasn't too long before I arrived there at Lime Street. It was still very early, so I thought I would have a coffee before I started busking. I sat down in a bistro bar and watched some of the early morning activities passing by on the street. I decided to find a suitable spot where I could sing my song, so I finished my coffee and took a walk through Church Street, looking for a central position to stand. It was starting to get busy now as Saturday morning shoppers began to pound the pavement. It looked promising. There seemed to be thousands of people on the move. I sat up in an alleyway near Church Street that looked just right to cater for my needs. I sat on a bench near a doorway with the right ingredients for busking. My first song was a cover of the Beatles songs, followed by a Jimi Hendrix number. My voice was carried by the breeze all the way back to the pier. The city centre was buzzing with people, but I picked up an unwelcome attitude from the passers-by who seemed to maybe resent the fact that I had come to busk in their city. There was a kind of a stillness and a coldness about being there. And in about a half an hour I could see busking in Church Alley was not going to work for me. So I moved to the main drag and started to busk, and I stood there for 3 hours singing my songs. Then I moved to Lord Street and back again to Church Street Mall, but every number I did was not felt welcome. My busking box remained empty, except for the 20p coin I placed there myself. I wasn't going to let this unwelcomeness dampen my spirits, so I kept playing and I wouldn't keep quiet. This apathy was not going to get the better of me. I started singing. Something in the way she moves attracts me like no other lover. But there was something in the way that Liverpool was wanting to put me under cover. And my busking heart said, never give up, never give in, never give out, stand your ground and keep singing. And I did that. I did what my heart told me to do on a Saturday afternoon in Liverpool shopping centre. Regardless of the snobbery and the cold-faced robbery, I continued to bring my songs and music to those who passed me by as if I wasn't there. I smiled at their angry faces and ignored their sneers and snarls and busked on until it was almost ready for closing time. In my mind, I had so much that I wanted to do, but not enough time to do it. I wanted to discover the connection with the Fab Four from Liverpool, from the Quarrymen to the Beatles, to the places they played instead, to the places the Fab Four wrote about Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields. As a songwriter, I could understand the personal attachments to songs of the truth of their youth and the transition to their fame and who they became. I always wished I could have spoke to Paul McCartney and John Lennon about the formula behind their hits and how they were able to write so many brilliant songs one after the other. I wanted to sit in the places they played and imagine what it was like for them as a band from Liverpool just starting out. Like ghosts of time, I could close my eyes and see them all still there playing as a band to their local Liverpool fans. I needed time to discover the Beatles' story, but I had to give time to my own songs, and I already had too much to do today. As I sat there at the table near the door in this half a cafe, because the other half was a music shop, a long-legged, blonde-haired girl who resembled a scrounging student came over to take my order. "What can I get for you?" she asked. "A coffee and cake with cheese sandwich, please. How long would that take to make?" She scribbled that down and she replied, "A week or two if you got a time to wait." "Well, the thing is, I really don't have any time to wait," I said, "but I might pass the time by writing a song and then it won't seem that long." "So you play guitar then?" "Yeah, I spend my days writing songs and singing them on the street," I answered. She smiled and stood there with a notepad and a pencil in her hand as her blonde curls fell all over her face, and she seemed intrigued. "Why don't you put a band together and play songs in the pubs?" she asked. I said, "Well, there's not enough time to spare when you're writing songs to also be performing songs. That's why I've dedicated my time to just writing." "So do you spend your time in a cafe here, or is there something else that you do?" She laughed and she replied, "No, I pass the time mornings, in the classroom. I'm a student and the money I get here helps me pay the bills." A song began to drift into my head and I said, "Could I have a few spare pages there from your notepad?" "There you are, why?" "Well, I'm writing a new telephone directory of Liverpool and I was wondering maybe if I could have your phone number." She laughed and she answered, "Will you believe me if I tell you I don't have a phone?" "I believe you. Why would you lie to me?" said I with a smile. A punk there nearby, he began to make some noise about the lack of service in the cafe and the staff who didn't have enough time to take their orders. He really did have an attitude problem. The young waitress walked away with a sad face as the punk continued to kick and scream, demanding for some service. This face of this lovely Liverpool lass had left me, but not broken-hearted was I, because in the busker's eyes there are so many faces that are unforgettable. There are so many things a busker never forgets. I started to write down the lyrics of the song entitled "Lucky It's Not Raining." I had the melody in my head that helped me with the metre of the words for the song. Sometimes I would find that the melody came first and other times I would get the lyrics first. But whichever way the song would come, to me, it was always grateful to have that gift. Luckily it's not raining. On my own, miles from home, without a friend to call my own. I owe the rent and owe the bank. What's the use to moan? Lucky it's not raining when I'm on the corner busking. Lucky it's not raining 'cause I got some songs to sing. Weeks without a bite to eat makes it hard to walk the street. Busking is all I can do. Somehow help me through, make ends meet. Lucky it's not raining when I'm on the corner busking. Lucky it's not raining 'cause I got some songs to sing. I pay the bill when I do, and I left the cafe with a song in my head, and I walked around the town. I was so amazed at the colour and the characters of Liverpool. There were freaks in drag standing around, and hippies with flowers in their hair and beads round their neck. There were teddy boys with black leather jackets, and some gays wearing pink frocks, and some gothics in purple smocks, skinheads in their bopper boots, and businessmen in their topper hats. All around the town were posters of rock and roll legends and movie stars. It was like a sprinkle of Hollywood had fallen all over the city. It was closing time in the town now, and I had to forget completely about finding a place to stay, because everywhere I went and inquired, they were fully booked. So now I realised that maybe tonight I would have to sleep out rough somewhere, anywhere, as long as it was dry and safe. I made my way back to Lime Street Station to leave my bag and guitar in the left luggage depot there at the station for safekeeping. And then I thought, if God could ever do me a favour, maybe now was the time. So I walked up the hill at Mount Pleasant in the pouring rain, and I went inside the Cathedral of Christ the King and got down on my knees and began to pray. I was about halfway through a Hail Mary when a bad excuse for a cleric tapped me on my rain-soaked shoulder, and he said, "Oi, you're not allowed to be in the seat. The rows are reserved. Would you mind moving somewhere else?" I looked up into his red face, my voice and thoughts charged and changed from a reverence to an anger, and I responded, "Listen, I'm just saying a few prayers in here, and as far as I'm concerned, this seat is reserved for no one except for those who come to pray." He started to argue the point, so I got up and walked away from the row of empty reserved seats and stormed out the building and grabbed the parish bulletin on the way. I thought to myself, who the hell does he think he is, and what gives him the right to say who sits where in a house of prayer? It just so happened I spotted there was an Irish club nearby, so I went inside and took a seat, and I watched the Irish dancing competition that was on show. I spoke to a few of the people who were there, just to distract my ill feelings towards what had happened earlier on. Then I asked to speak to the management of the Irish club with the thought of maybe getting a place for some of my songs that I could play some evening in the hall. Anyway, it seemed that they were too busy and had no time to spare to talk to me. Even though I had waited over an hour or more, they didn't have the decency even to speak to me, and I ended up just walking out of the door. And then I found a cold night for companion down by the Liverpool pier. It was such a long night there, and what a night it was. I amused myself with the blues harp in my top pocket where it usually lived, and I played a few lonely notes out of the blues harp. Then I was approached by a young lad who sat down beside me. I was actually glad of the company, but wondered what on earth would anybody be doing here at this time of the night in a waiting room at Liverpool pier. I'm sure that he was wondering the same thing himself. So I guessed that my blues harmonica must have drawn him to me. Then suddenly he stood up in front of me and he said, "You got a light?" He produced a very large joint of grass, so I took out my cigarette lighter and lit it up for him. He stood there reefing away at it, and as the wind roared in from the Irish Sea through a broken window in the waiting room, the tattered strands of his hair blew all over the place around his face, and with the smoke from the joint wafting away towards the city streets. And I kept playing the blues harp, and he started asking questions. "What's somebody like you doing here alone in this place?" I answered him with exactly the same question, and he replied, "I like to come down here at night when no one's round, to escape crazy side of the city life, you know. It's a rat race out there, eh? Here, it's peaceful." He sucked on his joint. "Yeah, I guess it is," I said, and he answered, "See you later then, huh?" He descended back down the stairs of the waiting room into a car park. I heard a car start up and drive away. I got up and walked through the waiting room from one end to the other. I spotted a change room there down in the wharf, so I went to have a look. And inside the change room there was a table and a chair. And there was a coat hanging up from a nail in the wall. I felt like taking the coat. It looked warm. I felt like staying in there for a while, but decided not to hang around too long, just in case somebody might see me, and then I'd be arrested for trespassing. I walked back to the pier that was floating underneath me, and I swayed from side to side as I walked along. When I returned to the waiting room, I noticed a large cardboard box was sitting there near the steps, and I thought to myself, a gift from God? Somewhere warm out of the cold wind? So I went over and I opened up the box. Yeah, it was a miracle. I found £250 and a note that was written in large block letters, and it said, "Please find here some money. I've just spent 3 weeks living in this cardboard box. Now I've found a job and a house to live in. Hope the money will bring you good luck, and it will help you to find a place to live and not sleep out like I did in a cardboard box." I took the money and made my way from the pier as the sun peeped up in the sky and whispered to the world, "It's a new day." I carried my good fortune and smiled as I walked through the town, and I saw the taxi driver's hut where hot coffee and morning papers were on sale, and started to feel the warmth slowly return to my numb fingers. As the morning went on, I collected my stuff from the left luggage and made my way up to Mount Pleasant to the YMCA and booked a room for the night. Then I returned to the city centre and did some busking around the walkways and the corners and the alleyways and the doorways, in the hope of awakening the hard heart with my music. And I found that somehow most port cities are a bit like that. Liverpool, Belfast, they're not really open and welcoming to buskers. The people there have no time to spare to stop and listen or to give any appreciation for the busker standing there, sharing his songs. I started again singing and hoping to win the heart of the Liverpudlians, but I started to realise that it was an impossible task. And so, again, in the end, I decided to leave well enough alone. I spent enough time in Liverpool sharing my songs, then I started to set my sights on London once again. I booked a bus ticket to London and took a few days' rest and did some sightseeing around, just being a tourist in Liverpool before I left. I booked a room at the Shaftesbury Hotel and spent the rest of my time there, getting my thoughts together. And it wasn't the leaving of Liverpool that worried me, it was the grieving of what was to come and lay ahead in London. I still had a bank of money left for the journey, but I was aware that London had the ability to burn all the spare money from your pockets. My time in Liverpool was running out, and the last day I went down to the Kennan Cinema in Lime Street and I saw a movie that made me feel even more depressed than when I went in. I went to an underground disco that night where I had a few drinks with people I didn't know, and we spoke about things like music and faraway places that no one had ever heard or ever seen. The next day I stood waiting with my bag and my guitar for the bus. "Mercy, mercy, mercy," said. It was just a brief hello, and now it's time to go. "Lord have mercy on me," I said as I got on board the National Express bus bound for London. End of chapter 10.